There has been some fantastic positive steps taken by bureaucrats and the current establishment.
To say what this bill will entail, I think is still going to be speculative.
That speculation of the word ban without nobody understanding what is a source. Like, nobody had any sources. I'm being honest here. I'm being brutally honest here, man.
Ideas which make today look trivial are essentially spawning the seeds for further innovation that might become serious, really serious business and a way of life in time to come.
Every time Business Insider India hosts a AMA or Ask Me Anything session, one of the most common questions we get, especially when we're talking about cryptocurrencies, is it legal? In fact, that one question has the potential of derailing the entire AMA, with everybody asking the same question, everybody wanting to know one nuance or the other. And the question about legality of cryptocurrencies in India has, taken a new form altogether over the last couple of weeks, with the government signaling their thoughts on a few of these issues. Some of these thoughts have been reiterated. And especially today, we've had more such comments coming in from the finance minister. To understand what this means, to be able to understand the nuances of what these means and what it means for investors like you, we have two very proficient gentlemen who have been reading the leaves, or so to speak, about everything in the world of cryptocurrency and the legality around it in India. Please join me in welcoming Anirudh Rastogi, the founder and managing partner at Ikigai Law. Anirudh, thanks for plugging into Business Insider India.
My pleasure, Ashwin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anirudh. And please do welcome back Aritra Sarkar, the Director for Public Policy and Government Affairs at WazirX, India's leading crypto exchange. Aritra, welcome back. This is your third session with us, and it's good to have you back with us.
Thanks, Ashwin. Hey, Anirudh.
Hello.
So, gentlemen, lots of buzz around cryptocurrencies and the legality around it and the rulings around it. And especially right now, we have the finance minister who came about a little while back, and she said a few things. Let me read this out, the nuances of this largely. First thing, of course, is the government has not taken a call on banning crypto advertisements by crypto exchanges. That's the first thing that she said. She's also said we are in a position where we are close to bringing a bill to the parliament. She's also said that the previous bill has been reworked. The bill coming is a new bill, which is interesting. And the risk that cryptocurrencies can lead to undesirable activities is being closely monitored. And they've been closely monitoring this for a while. So let's talk about these elements. Anirudh, coming first to you. We are in a position where we are close to bringing a bill to the parliament. What do you think this bill could entail? Now, we've been talking about the bill over the last year. We expected it to come in. It hasn't been coming, and I was saying it's going to come in very soon. How are you reading the proceedings so far?
Ashwin, it's this question is on everyone's mind right now, and as my colleague Priyam likes to say, that if this bill were a digital asset, it would be far more volatile than Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else trading out there. It's really bizarre on how in the last couple of months we've had so much speculation about what's going to come our way, and we still do not have clarity. In fact, when the parliamentary agenda was released, and obviously it seems like it was a lazy cut copy paste from the parliamentary agenda in March, and that caused so much mayhem, right? So I mean, I wish our government had taken a slightly more methodical kind of approach towards crafting this regulation. But all said and done, I think we are in a good place. We are finally at a place where there is very serious deliberation. There have been regulatory consultations with regulators, etc., which the industry has been demanding now for many years. In fact, I remember when we were before the Supreme Court representing the exchanges there, there was a point in time when the Supreme Court really pulled up the RBI, saying that, well, all the concerns flagged by you in your petition, in your counter, basically addressing to the RBI, have actually been addressed seemingly by the exchanges previously in representations to you, which you have not read, which you've not done any public consultation. So why don't you do that before we hear you further, right? So I think I'm glad that we are finally at that place. To say what this bill will entail, I think is still going to be speculative, because there's lack of clarity. But murmurs about the government wanting to ban use of cryptos for payments, for example, is not surprising, because that's been a stance consistently taken by the government right from the Arun Jaitley's 2018 budget speech, and we've seen that kind of play out consistently. Likewise, there are news reports that suggest that the government might pre-approve a list of cryptocurrencies for trading. And I believe that what we really need at this juncture is a law that one recognizes legality, so that you put all the speculation to rest, but something which is a little more light touch than what we are hearing about, right? I mean, an overly restrictive or over-regulating a new emerging technology could be deeply problematic, because it's a rapidly evolving space, and for the government to keep pace with that, in terms of the legislation, is obviously going to be difficult, right? So to build state capacity to regulate something like this is also a challenge. And for that reason, I hope that the government doesn't take some of this very overly restrictive or over-regulated, overly regulate the space with some of the kind of suggestions that we are hearing. A light touch approach, sandboxes for experiments, kind of allowing some kind of co-regulation or self-regulation where the industry has a say. Some of those things would be very useful.
Thanks for that, Anirudh. In fact, a lot of very pertinent points are there. Aisha, I know that a lot of self-regulation is something that the exchanges would completely love. I know you've in the past come out publicly and said that you are in fact building the norms around which you would like to operate together as a collective industry. Again, it's been an unsettling past couple of weeks, but how are you thinking at WazirX?
I want to be really honest on this answer, but I have to choose my words carefully after what happened last week in the media. But here's the thing, man. Like from 2018 till now, it's been a fantastic turn of events, so to say, at this stage, factually speaking. But in the last 6-8 months, a lot of things have changed. Say the last 1 year, from the verdict that Anirudh was mentioning on the Supreme Court, to a lot of things which has happened in the background. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of lovely things have happened in the background in terms of exchanges, like folks from the exchanges, parliamentarians, bureaucrats, everybody got involved and they started asking each other questions. We all know the parliamentary committee where Jain Sinha sir had chaired. That happened on crypto, sort of a public consultation, right? But there's a lot of Q&A that has happened in the last few months. There's a lot of effort that and I'm not saying this just because today I represent WazirX. There's a lot of things that has happened from the government side in terms of they wanting to understand, oh, wait, what do you mean by mining? What do you mean by merged mining? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? So some of the questions that we were getting, right? I'm just giving an example, right? What do you mean by wallet system? What is Web 3.2 different from Web 2.2? Like things that I would discuss with my product manager or I would discuss with myself when I'm trying to do something new. But there has been some fantastic positive steps taken by bureaucrats and the current establishment in the last 8 months in terms of understanding more about the industry, in terms of taking a step forward and not doing anything like, what, this is bad, good or bad, let's ban them or let's just take them forward. So they've been very nice about in terms of they've taken an approach which is sort of a middle ground. But as I would say, that's one thing which has happened. Now, there's another thing which happened in the last 1 week, which I don't think is correct at all. Whether it was an error or whether somebody just copy pasted the same, as Anirudh was saying, copy pasted the same lines from January of this year before the budget and now before the winter session. Ideally, it could have been left. It could have been left like that. But the amount of speculation that happened, I think today is what, Tuesday, the amount of speculation that happened on that Thursday or Friday between 8:30 when it was published and 10:30 in the media was just disheartening to see. Extremely disheartening to see. I built my career in this media, I've been on that side. Those 3-4 hours led to that speculation of the word ban without nobody understanding what is a source. Like nobody had any sources. I'm being honest here. I'm being brutally honest here, man. Not a single media house in this country had any source on that. Everybody just said ban, 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 ban. The markets fell, crashed, speculation. So that is wrong. So what Nirmala ma'am today in the Parliament session, she said that, as you also rightly pointed out, right, Ashwin, at the beginning, that they have been looking at it. They have looked at the last bill. There was an intent from the government to even put out the last bill, but then, as she correctly said, that they've looked into other factors. If anybody everybody hearing this, if you hear what Nirmala ma'am said today, so the intent has always been there. But now what has happened, and why am I sounding so confident? Do I have, again, source which says that something good is going to happen? No, I'm sounding confident based on the kind of conversations we have had with the government in terms of understanding this industry much better, and regulations. Like, they themselves have asked us, okay, you tell us what kind of regulations do you think, like, do you think should be apt for your industry? So all these things have happened. So it's been kind of a good shift, I would say, that has happened from last year. But as a fan, obviously, I would think that a ban is out of the way. As an employee of one of the largest exchanges in India, I think we're very happy with the kind of steps the current establishment has taken in terms of understanding the industry better and probably taking it forward. What might come in the bill, who knows, man? Nobody has seen the fine print. I have not seen the fine print. I wish all the consultations that has happened till now, all those points are taken forward, and a thriving industry goes forward from here. Because you need to understand what happens. Even if it is, like, say, 40% positive, the bill, this will open up, investors. When I say investors, there will be family offices, there will be traditional VC firms who will put money in the industry more in India. So it's a new world which is going to open up if things happen, if, say, something positive comes out. And I think it's something positive is going to come out. So we'll leave it at that.
And it's a funny position that the government is in, right? Or rather, I would say it's a very unenviable position, because on one hand, as Anirudh was talking about, you need to foster an industry which is extremely new, extremely emerging. Even the people in the industry don't know where this can potentially lead to in a larger scheme of affairs. On the other hand, you have investors, retail investors who have pumped in a fair amount of money out there and who are very cautious about it. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction clearly talks about the kind of interest that people have in this space. You need to make sure that the field is open enough for foreign investors to be able to look and invest in the country. And yet you need to build regulations around this. So the government has this responsibility of appeasing multiple sectors using one set of regulations. So Anirudh, coming to you, what would be the prudent first steps that the government should take? And I know you use the word light touch. What would this light touch be that signals multiple things, perhaps? One, to the investors that they are taken care of. Two, to the private equity investors who want to look at the space. Three, to the industry itself, which is looking at the government to provide the guardrails so that they can go further about. So what would be good light touch that, one, satisfies the investors and yet opens up the potential and possibilities?
Yeah, Ashwin, I think I fully agree with you that it is not an enviable position to be in. I mean, it is a very challenging space, right? And significant concerns, and from multiple stakeholders, which need to be balanced out. And obviously, I would say, therefore, the first thing you need to do is to essentially be open to having consultations with people who are in the midst of this, right? So whether it's the industry or other stakeholders, and I think that's finally now begun to happen. So that's a good thing. From a light touch perspective, well, I mean, I think any legislations should lay down broad principles rather than kind of becoming too granular about how these principles need to be necessarily implemented, and leave some of that to whether it is delegated legislation or ideally, I mean, I'm not sure if the government what appetite the government has for this, but ideally having a self-regulatory body really kind of essentially lay out the the modalities for implementing, for penalties, etc., etc. There is, and by the way, self-regulation is not new in this country, right? I mean, it is something that we have enough examples of, and no reason why we cannot follow them in this sector as well. The other examples, for example, having sunset clauses, which are essentially that you introduce a certain regulatory framework, but say that it is meant to the sun will set on XA in a 12-month period, which means that it needs to be reconsidered or reevaluated, because otherwise there's typically a lot of inertia, right? I mean, it takes, as you've seen, even for this legislation to come to where it is, it's taken us years, right? So there's a lot of inertia once you have a law in place. Then, so having those kind of time limitations, etc., is a good way to do it. I mentioned earlier about sandboxes. Right now, if you know, the RBI sandbox in place today actually specifically bars cryptocurrency businesses, which is bizarre. I mean, sandboxes are meant to be created for exactly for these kind of businesses, which are cutting edge, less understood, and have regulatory concerns. I mean, that's why you create a sandbox, right? So, so these are some examples that could be, of light touch regulation that could be put in place. Yeah.
Aritra?
Okay, there's a couple of things I want to put out. One would there's one more layer of thought to this, which has been a topic of heated debate and questions that we've been personally asked, and even in sessions like this. To add to what Anirudh was saying, there's one more layer of thought which says, let's have digital currency, let's have a CBDC, and let's not have cryptos. Okay, that's another thing that we have heard a lot. We've been questioned a lot, but I think also it's naive when we say that have this and don't have this not. I mean, fundamentally and technically they are different things. So I think it's a beautiful period we are in India, and RBI has been talking about CBDC for quite a while now. There are people who like CBDC. There are folks who do not like CBDC. There are people who like cryptos, who do not like cryptos from the tech part or the fundamental part of what it does. But both will coexist. Trust me. If it comes, technically both will coexist. CBDCs fundamentally they're private blockchains. They're built in a very, very different environment. Now the implications of that are very different. There are in terms of what role does the private banks play after that. That's a very different debate. But cryptos and CBDCs, they can easily coexist in a country like India. Like what I mean to say is, you have a CBDC for whatever reasons, and you have cryptos as assets, and you tax them as whatever as commodities. It can easily exist. But right now, considering the volatility of the prices of most of these coins and tokens, it doesn't make sense for it to be used as a currency in a country like India or United States and all that. And that's a very factually right thing. And I'm being honest here, because you need to understand, and some of us need to understand where this argument has come from. So when the folks who wrote the code for blockchain, I mean, whether it was one Satoshi or it was 20 members Satoshis, nobody knows. But the gentlemen and women, I would like to say men and women, who wrote the first code for first line of code for the Bitcoin's blockchain, the period that this was happening, we all need to understand that there was a very different sentiment that these folks had come up with. Like there was a financial crisis happening at that point of time. People had lost their jobs in 2007, 8, and all of that. So that their version was very different. They were like, you know what? We don't like the way the dollar is being managed. We don't like the way the economy is being managed. So we'll come up with people money, programmable money. Okay, these are fundamentally. I mean, we can go into details of what and why of the first white paper, but it has moved from there. I think a pivotal moment in crypto happened when you had Ethereum being accepted. Think of Ethereum like an operating system, right? As I keep saying, don't even use the word blockchain. What is Ethereum? Just it's like an operating system. People are using its services. Many companies are coming using its services, and in return you give something back to the ecosystem, right? In coins. Now that changed everything. That smart contract thing that came out of the code, that practically changed the way the crypto ecosystem works. Today, there are many companies who just exist because of Ethereum. It just exists because of the code of the Ethereum. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is, see, initially there were a few people, and what those guys, and you need to respect and honor them, because today we're having this discussion because those gentlemen, those I would say lawyers, coders, those guys decided to write that white paper. Those guys decided to create these lines of code for blockchain. The reasons why they did it was very different, because the economic conditions those days was very different. The mindset was very different. Today, it's very different. What has happened today, you have different kinds of blockchains, right? With different kinds of services. So having said that, as a currency, that argument, I don't think so. It makes sense for a country like India. CBDCs will exist, should exist. It has fantastic benefits in terms of reaching out to the last common denominator in India in terms of there are a lot of things, but I don't want to get into it. It is somebody else's job. RBI is doing a lovely job. I don't want to put other words in their mouth. But cryptos will also very politely and silently coexist along with CBDCs in India. These are coins, these are tokens, and I'll add another line to it because I think this is also one question a lot of people have asked, and this is also one question I've seen on TV debates. A lot of people angrily ask, "What crypto? Why do you need crypto? Huh? What is the underlying value of crypto?" I'm sure you have. I think Ashwin would have asked this to many people. Anirudh sir somebody would have asked Anirudh sir also about the same thing. But there's a way to look at it. If this is a coin, its underlying value, according to me, is based on the digital services it provides. Like if Ethereum's code allows it to provide certain digital services to companies and users outside, right? The value increases a little bit, right? That's the way it is. But because it's a very open source ecosystem, it's massively open source, it's massively democratic, but it allows also a lot of people to come up with their own coins. There are problems, So if regulations come, all these things will stop. So there's a term, right, that keeps being thrown around in the media about shit coins or meme coins, right? Now, the way I look at it, the ecosystem, the way it is constructed, has allowed people to come up with that, allowed engineers to come up with certain coins like that. It can exist, but because this is the reason why you need regulations. Because when you have regulations, you'll have rules for, XYZ coins will come into India. These are the things which coexist in India. Now, mind you, I mean, it cannot be a final binded document because these things will change. The technology changes, it refreshes. You can't just say, now Bitcoin is very different. The way Bitcoin is structured, nobody owns. I mean, technically, there is not a CEO of Bitcoin, right? You still have Ethereum's CEO, you still have Solana's CEO, you still have WazirX's CEO. I'm just talking from the coin perspective. So a lot of things will also need to evolve. This is not. Let's not look at this bill or eventually. Touch wood, if it becomes a law, let's not look at it as a final frontier for crypto. In the next 5 years, just in the next 5 years, a lot of things will evolve. There are a lot of things already happening in the background on the decentralized finance side, right? We're not even talking about the impact of that. I don't even want to go into legal and the policy side.
That would be an entire discussion in itself. We want to talk about decentralized finance and its implications. No, but really, I mean, the most common thing I get asked when I talk about cryptocurrencies is that what should I buy? Nobody ever talks and debates with me and saying, what's a good white paper out there? What's the legitimacy of, But Anirudh, where do you stand with the whole CBDC discussion out there? It's much better option? Is that where you would put your, chips in?
No, so, I wrote an opinion piece in the Economic Times just a couple of weeks back on why CBDCs and cryptocurrencies can and should coexist, and I fully agree with Aritra on this. So if I could just explain this with an example, but before that, the proposition, like CBDCs are meant to solve for a particular problem statement, right? They are meant to offer a currency use case on the blockchain. Cryptocurrencies, and there are more than 8,000 or 10,000 of them today, and many of them are your memes or joke coins or whatever. But the more serious ones are meant to solve different problem statements, right? So it is not, in fact, currency was the originally intended use case of the Bitcoin. But since then, we've had Ethereum and you've had 1,000 others solving for different problems. Now imagine, and I want to now explain this with an example of what the problem is. If you were to say that, well, CBDCs can solve for whatever this huge universe of cryptos are going to solve for, is this. That if, back in the day, if the government had decided, well, the internet is somewhat problematic, it's shady because anybody can use it to communicate peer-to-peer, we have little surveillance over it. Well, who actually governs the internet anyway, right? I mean, and therefore, if they were to say, well, wait, why don't we build our own email service? Because that's what you use it for, right? And why can't people just, in fact, the Indian government does have an email service, which is used for, official communication. Now, if that was the way you would have gone, say, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, you wouldn't have the Zomatos and Amazons and the Flipkarts and Facebooks of the world, right? So I think that's I want to draw the similar analogy. CBDCs are meant to serve a particular purpose, and I'm a great believer that it is the right thing and the right time for India in fact, we are probably running late. We should be looking at what countries in our neighborhood like China, etc., are doing, and we need to be running our own pilots. But private cryptocurrencies have their own use cases and multiple use cases, which CBDCs are not meant to solve for. So if we were to assume that CBDCs can solve for everything, then we'll be essentially coming in the way of whatever innovation that can happen on privately.
Exactly, and that's the extremely complicated tightrope that the finance ministry has to straddle over the next couple of months to ensure that they're keeping everything reasonably well balanced and not, essentially riveting something to the ground that can become problematic a year later, considering the change of pace. A hypothetical question, and I know this is something that keeps coming in our AMAs every now and then. If the government were to prohibit, and I'm not saying ban, I mean prohibit some, let's say, some kinds of crypto coins, what would be the state of the investor at that point of time, somebody who's invested in coins which are prohibited at that point of time? I'm trying to essentially assume a scenario because I know this is what our viewers will be wanting to know at the end of the day, saying that, look, I own a portfolio of 10 coins, but the government is saying that 8 of them are prohibited and we can't deal with them. What's likely to happen after that for the consumer? Anirudh?
Yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, and I hope that the government will allow some time frame for the investors to liquidate their holdings, how will you really find liquidity when almost everybody is selling at the same time is going to be a challenge. And maybe Arikra from who represents the exchanges here may be a better place to answer that. I hope that at that point, we are able to find a way to tap into global liquidity for these transactions. But that is a big challenge. I worry. Why I worry about it? I mean, I understand where the government is coming from, which is that there are all kinds of coins out there, and some are scammy or literally with no intrinsic value, with no technical no use case necessarily, and the value is just driven by speculation. I understand that, but the challenge is who decides what is what, right? I mean, I don't think the government is very well placed to identify coins which are merely speculative and coins which actually represent an emerging new technical use case, right? I mean, if you look at NFTs today, everybody's talking about what they mean for our future, in the digital kind of what they mean for the metaverse and the gaming industry and for the art industry. But 2 years ago, when they started as CryptoKitties, which was, honestly, I mean, how could one take it seriously, right? At that point, but that's how many a times with technologies like these, it is not evident on day one of what is going to come of it, right? So it takes a while, and I don't think the government is very well placed to identify that.
Just a quick question, Anirudh. What's your sentiment every time Elon Musk tweets?
It's quite funny for. But I do think that I wish Elon. I mean, I don't know what's going on in his mind every time he tweets, to be honest, and what is he trying to achieve with it. But most certainly, I mean, I hope he realizes that, and I think he does realize that, he's every word that he says has an implication, and it is. It can cause massive market movement. So it is, I mean, I mean, I just wish that he exercised a little more discretion when he was.
Well, he named his kid that sounds like a password. So I'm like, you're right. You don't know what he's thinking most of the time. So he's definitely. But you just spoke about the metaverse. A quick comment. is regulation on the metaverse something that you're thinking at the corner of your mind, thinking that I need to spend some time and think about how this is potentially likely to roll out? I mean, we're still scratching the surface. I mean, the industry itself is really trying to figure out what can happen in the metaverse. In all reality, you had Second Life that existed nearly 2 decades back, and I mean, if you're in the tech space, you know what that is. But now it's coming into the absolute mainstream. Do you reckon some kind of regulation will be warranted, maybe 5-6 years?
No,
Or if you're
definitely.
lucky.
At some point, I mean, and we are already having a lot of policy discussions around various kinds of issues. So metaverses can become serious business, right? I mean, even back in the day, 10 years ago, Second Life was, you already had businesses buying real estate, setting up shopping experiences. It is serious. I mean, typically, and there can be fraudulent activity, there can be other criminal activity. So it will require a rethinking of our regulatory frameworks, most certainly. But see, again, I mean, if I were to draw an analogy, back in the day, 2010, when we well, in fact, before the dot-com, at the time of the dot-com bust, right, you had many businesses which today are not laughable. Today they are serious businesses, but at that time, in fact, I quote somebody else here who pointed out that even during the dot-com bust, you did have somebody trying to sell vegetables in a hyperlocal, basically hyperlocal retail of grocery, right? And obviously the company went bankrupt, except that 10 years later, it's big business. So many a times, a lot of these things start off as and are seen as fads. It is often it takes sometimes a decade for people to for the adoption to really happen, and that's what's happening with blockchain, and that's what's going to happen with metaverse as well. So a lot of ideas which make today look trivial, which make today look like they are mere entertainment, are essentially spawning the seeds for further innovation that might become really serious business and a way of life in time to come.
Is that something you're thinking about at Ikigai, the metaverse, somewhere at the corner of your mind?
We're always thinking of things 5 years hence, and yeah, clearly, definitely, we do work with a fair number of clients in the VR, AR, metaverse space. So I think it's not really a thing of 5 years or 10 years from now. I think it's very much our reality, and I mean, even if you try the Oculus today and try just gaming with it, you will see that the technology has come so far.
Yeah.
And to be honest, as a kid, used to read this magazine called Target, which is, I'm talking 25 years ago, which actually had an animated chapter on virtual reality. And at that time, it used to look like this is, this is unrealistic, right? I mean, it's just something which it used to sound like sci-fi. But today, that technology is not only there, but it's becoming commercially available to the retail consumer. And once that starts to happen, I think the time's here. So yeah, very
That's
good.
Good to hear. Aritha, let me come back to you to that question of if some cryptocurrencies were to be, let's say, prohibited, where would that place investors?
I mean, it's a if that happens, I don't want that to happen, but I think, as Anirudh said, I mean, I think there's a lot of capital which is involved. If that happens, again, I'm going to use the word if irritatingly many times now, but if that happens, I'm sure the government is going to give a certain period of time to the exchanges and as well as investors, the retail investors in India. Between this X and Y, you can sell. And all of that, you have to furnish, and then you might have to also furnish information in terms of where did you get this capital from, and all of that. Probably a taxation might come for even the sell-off thing, but that, I think, I don't think this will happen. I mean, even while I'm saying this, I don't think the way the government is right now, the way things are in India right now, with the number of people who are involved, with the number of the amount of capital which is involved, the amount of tech which is involved, the number of people who are in this industry working in terms of the jobs part, I don't think that will happen. But if that does happen, I think there'll be a period where the government will allow you to sell it off and all of that. But those are legal processes, and I don't want to imagine and say, "Oh, this will happen," and all of that. But of course, and as an exchange, if it happens, it happens. We'll follow the due course of land. But that won't happen because you don't want another brain drain happening in this country. Nobody wants, trust me. With the gentleman that men and women that we talk to in Delhi, I don't think anybody wants another brain drain. They want this. It's a good period. We are seeing the next generation of internet companies being created out of here. Although this is a decentralization concept where it doesn't have to be in a particular country or an area. You can be from anywhere building. But the core of it, imagine a country like India. Imagine if today India, out of all the countries, today I'm sitting out of I'm sitting out of Paris. We're meeting some European Commission people on blockchain, and the kind of talks they're doing, and the kind of talks our government is doing. This is a mad innovation happening in the policy field. But one good thing that I've realized, even with the folks here and back home, is that there is a subtle understanding that this might not be the final end game. This has to be rehashed. The last point I made was on DeFi and a metaverse. I don't even want to jump into metaverse. It's madly fascinating what's happening in metaverse, the kind of companies that are coming up over there. So just like with any other technology, it's like a period. I have this analogy I remember. See, there are these 4 phases for any technology. The first phase is going to be where you'll have new products like CryptoKitties, right? I don't know. Anirudh did mention CryptoKitties. Even I found it I found it very weird. You can have your own digital cats and you can sell your own digital cats online. And when I say sell, they were being sold for millions of dollars at that point of time. I laughed it off. I was one of those. I even went and wrote a post about this. I was doing something else in my life that time. Like, what is this? This is rubbish. I was completely against that. 2 years down the lane, 2 years from that, it's a slap on my face. I'm so happy that I'm part of the industry. I'm so happy that I've taken the decision, and I'm happy that I was wrong. Look what NFTs are doing, man. So first phase is when you have these new products and industries. There's an explosive growth which will happen. And fast innovations. Right? Kitties came what 2-3 years ago, if I'm not wrong. That was like the timeline. Then comes phase 2. Phase 2 is where these constellation happens. Like these new industries become a little bit more mature. The systems come into place, policies come into place, the infrastructure comes into place. Then you have the third phase where full expansion of the innovation and the market potential happens. And then you have the last phase where there are some which will fizzle out. There are only few products and industries which will be left out of this. And then and that's the saturation part. And this goes on. Take the example of Intel, right? When did Intel, I'm bad with numbers and dates. Intel, from the day and the year Intel came out with the chip, the actual computing and internet revolution happened many, many years later, boss. It takes time. So there are people, I remember, I still have paper cuts. My father has given me these paper cutouts of people laughing off the internet, people laughing off the mobile phone, internet, people laughing off all those things. These are front page articles, some of the most powerful newspapers of the world, by the way, in the mid 80s and all of that. And there's also an article which laughed off mainframe computing, the ones that IBM did. So it's one thing to predict what the future will look like in the industry, and there's another thing to predict in how many years it will happen. So you just leave it out, man. Open source. There are 16, 16-year-old kids I know in India. I think last time I also mentioned, and I keep mentioning this everywhere in my conversation with the government. I've given them example. There are 14, 15 kids who are creating companies on blockchain. They didn't go to any school. They learned a Solidity or Rust online. They're creating their own companies, and these are all the rules are set in program in the code, by the way, like governance codes. There's no hierarchy of people anymore. So these are like, how do I say it? So there's a friend of mine, I can't take his name. He's a kid, actually. I've interacted with him as a fanboy. He's a 16-year-old kid in Kerala who's created this DeFi ecosystem where he has employees, and their employees only when they finish a task in the code and the code tells, this task has been done, that's when the money gets deposited. The salary gets deposited. A part of the check goes over there. Completely autonomous. He has employees who sit out of Africa and other parts of Asia. So how do you, now the question is, one lawmaker asked me this question, how do you make laws for this? It will happen. It will evolve. So stuff like that. So it's a four-step process, man. It will happen. And the investment part, I think it's a natural movement. Anybody who gets into crypto for the first time, at least folks that I have known in my life, the first thing they do is get into crypto in the form of investments, like an investor. Oh, I will invest in this coin because obviously you've heard the rumor, oh, this will help me gain this much wealth, blah, 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 hedge against inflation and all of that. It's only then comes step two for these retail investors. And I've seen this personally happening with people around me. Then they realize, oh, this is what the ecosystem is all about. This is what the code does. Oh, this is what kind of companies you can build and blah, blah, blah. So this is how, and that's mostly, that's one of the reasons mostly people get into crypto through investments. And this is, the centralized exchanges do exist today, but in the next 5 years, you don't know what form will these exchanges be in. Like Nishal keeps saying this back in our company. There's a joke within the company that I think we've taken decentralization a little too seriously. We don't sit. We have decided we'll never be in a physical office. We'll always be here and there working. We're all here. We're all across the world working for WazirX. Now, there's another thought which came to it, which some of these lawmakers were asking us. When I say us, all the other companies, in terms of how do you register a company there should be laws for registering such crypto companies in India. Like just like you have companies like the IPO, right? There are certain rules based on which you can go for an IPO, you can do an IPO in this country, right? So stuff like that. There should be laws for ICOs and stuff, ICOs and for crypto companies to IPO on the digital front. But yes, it's a process. It's a 3-4 year process. It happens. What form and how it evolves, I really don't know, man.
They're all glued in for the same thing to find out where this is going to go. Well, nearing the end of our discussion, and I just want to quickly bring in Anirudh on this small thing. One of the most common things that almost everybody asks us is that, how should I invest in crypto? How much money should I, invest in crypto? As somebody who is largely looking at the legal side of cryptocurrency and advising, businesses, what is your advice to retail investors who are, crypto curious, or so to speak, and who really want to enter the scheme, enter the world of investing in cryptos?
Yeah, I mean, Ashwin, I think. I think different investors invest with different objectives in mind. And what's important is you're clear about what those objectives are. I'm not going to give out any investment advice here. Really, I don't think that's fair. I don't think, I would have my own investment objectives, a different risk appetite, and I'll look at investing in cryptos accordingly. But be clear. So one is that if you're crypto curious, I think that's a good reason to invest. And in fact, honestly, the reason I invest is largely out of curiosity, because I'm quite entrenched in the industry, and it helps me. Investing also helps me kind of keep one hand on the pulse of what's just be familiar with what's going on. But if you are investing, if you're a sophisticated investor who's educated enough, who's spending the time, has the patience to learn and keep a track of the markets, because it's a fairly volatile space, then of course, I think you would, in any case, then you're probably not looking for advice from me. You probably have a good sense of how much money or how much capital you could allocate. But for everybody else, I think the benchmark is invest what you are okay to lose, and then gradually build up your awareness and understanding of how the temperament of the markets, etc., and how well you can do at it. But for the most part, for most of these things, I think if you want to seriously invest, then you ought to have the time, patience, and energy to devote to understanding the markets, understanding the investment ecosystem. Otherwise, you're not going to all the stories that you hear about of people making millions and billions, and these are real stories, by the way. Either there are people who are fully devoted to investing, or many a times there are people who lucked out, and that's true. But you may not be as lucky as everybody else. And honestly, as the market matures, the opportunity to be lucky is also going to continuously decrease, right? As the market matures, speculation will reduce, prices will stabilize, there will be a little more. So all of that is going to happen. So I think we should be sensible. Don't gamble with your money.
Don't gamble with your money. And to encapsulate everything Anirudh said in one acronym. It's called DYOR, do your own research. Don't take research from anybody else. On that note, Anirudh, Aritra, gentlemen, it's been a delight to have you join us today here on Business Insider India. Lovely talking to you about this, and I reckon this is a conversation that's likely to continue, and we'll probably bring you back in as and when we hear more comments coming in from the government to really help us make sense, to decode, and really simplify it for all of us so that we are able to understand and really take that information to see how it's going to impact us and affect us. So on that note, Anirudh, Aritra, thank you so much again. Take care and have a great day.
Thanks, Ashwin.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.